With the recent release of the Batman, I thought I ranked some of the films that came out over the last few decades. Now, there are some exceptions to this list. I'm only doing the live adaptation films and no team up movies, except, of course, Dawn of Justice, simply because it makes more sense to me to do that. So, this is all of the non Batman films ranked from worst to best. Coming in at number 9 is Batman Robin. This movie is such a damn catastrophe. It killed the franchise for 8 years. And I generally just hate this movie for the self parody, the bad acting, and the puns.
You're not sending me to the cooler. What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age! Stay cool, bird boy.
Rubber lips are immune to your charms.
I hate when people talk during the movie. All right, everyone, chill.
And generally being the worst Batman film I ever seen. Seriously, the plot is absurd, the characters are over the top, and the acting, what can I say? It is horrific. George Clooney apologized for being Batman years later, and Joe Schumacher says this is one of the worst films he's ever directed. You know, this is, without question, one of the worst comic book films that ever been released. And this is a film I clearly hated the first time I saw it, and time has not done this movie wonders whatsoever. At the number 8 spot is Batman Forever. You know, after Michael Keaton had refused to return for a third Batman film, then Warner Bros. Decided to go in a different direction. This is where the downward trend of those terrible Batman films started. When you have Val Kilmer getting a mediocre performance, Jim Carrey being the Riddler, he's over the top, and everybody else in this film just does a horrendous job. Plus, there's the fact that Batman is smiling in one part of this film. Then you have a very mediocre Batman movie. The only reason it's above Batman Robin is because it's slightly better. But this still is a trash film, in my opinion. It's a straight up dumpster fire. And I really didn't like this film when I saw all those years ago. Certainly a Batman film that went in the wrong direction for a lot of reasons. Coming in at number 7 is Batman Returns. You know, I always thought Tim Burton's sequel to the original Batman was a weird film. The reason I say it is because of what they did with Catwoman and Penguin in this movie. I don't know, this movie is just, it's odd. It's not horrible, and it's not great either. It's somewhere in the middle, hence why it's at number 7. I mean, Michael Keaton did a good job as Batman once again. And then you have Dan DeVille as the Penguin and Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. And you know, their performances was interesting at the time, but you know, 20 years later, this film, it just always stood out to me. I just always thought this Batman film was decent and it wasn't as great as the original 1989 film. But still, this movie is entertaining for what it is. At the number 6 spot is The Dark Knight Rises, the third and final entry in the Dark Knight trilogy. I always thought this film was good. It wasn't never better than the previous two films. You have Bane in this scene, you have Catwoman, and then you have Batman trying to get back to the crime fighter that he was. And this film, it takes an interesting journey to conclude this trilogy. To see Bruce Wayne's story and how it ends in this film, I always thought it was very good. Still though, nonetheless, this movie does have some issues and a little bit of plot holes, but I always enjoy it for what this film was over the years. While as interesting as it is, I can't put it above the other entries on this list. But at the end of the day, I still find this film very enjoyable and the story is very compelling. Coming in at number 5 is Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. You know, this movie is played with issues, but I always consider this a good DC film. It's just a mere fact we never got a solo Batman film that had starred Ben Affleck. And so we have Batman in this movie, we have Superman, we have Wonder Woman, we have the introduction of the Justice League, and all these other storylines that makes the movie a little bit excessive. Like, this could have been a straight up Batman film, and I would have been alright by that. Now, the reason this film is so high on this list is because Ben Affleck is actually my favorite version of Batman. He's been Batman for 20 years, and he actually thinks that by stopping the Man of Steel, he's doing the world a favor. But he actually ends up changing for the better at the end of this film. Now, in my opinion, that's good character development. Now, despite what some people want to say about the Martha scene in this movie, I thought that was pretty good writing. Nonetheless, though, despite the issues this film has, it is still very entertaining to me personally. At the number 4 spot is The Batman. Even though I had just recently seen this movie, I think this film it is more interesting than the Batman movies on this list previously. It's just the mere fact they took inspiration from the 1970 films and comic books such as Year One, The Long Halloween, and Ego. And we have Robert Pattinson being a pretty good Batman. Now, this film ain't perfect. There are some story issues presented all throughout this film. And there are some things that I didn't like that I had discussed in my review of this film. But I will say the overall tone of this film, the performances from all the actors, and of course, the story at large, this is a very entertaining Batman film in my opinion. Batman 1989 comes in at number 3. You know, despite how outdated this film is, this movie always has a special place in my heart. We have Michael Keaton being the menace and Batman in this film. And of course, seeing Jack Nicholson as Joker was always a plus for me. You know, the film's story, while this is not an origin story, it's still good. We learn who Bruce Wayne is. We know what kind of man he is when he becomes Batman. And then we see him dealing with Joker. And then everything else thrown in this film makes this an iconic movie for me. Now, granted, some of this film hasn't aged that well, particularly Jack Nicholson's Joker, who is all loony. But the mere fact, this was a very interesting Batman film that came out all those years ago, and I still highly enjoy it. And the mere fact, I had recently rewatched this film weeks ago, makes this movie even more important just because of the continuity and then the kind of world Tim Burton had built for his Batman universe. And I enjoyed this film immensely. At the number 2 spot is Batman Begins. You know, when I had saw this film back in 2005 in theaters, I really appreciate what Christopher Nolan had did with Batman. And it had been 8 years, and the previous Batman films were ridiculous, Batman Forever, and Batman Robin. To get a realistic Batman, a darker tone, it actually made for a compelling movie. The villains were interesting, the story was great as this was an origin story. And of course, we have Christian Bale and his version of Batman and way he carries himself when he's the Dark Knight. And this movie was very compelling, and it still is even all these years later. And finally, at the number 1 spot is one of my favorite superhero films of all time is The Dark Knight. You know, there is a reason why this is considered one of the best films from the 2000s. When you have Bruce Wayne dealing with the menace, that's the Joker played by the late Heath Ledger, then you have a Batman film that not only feels realistic, but we see what one madman can do to the city of Gotham. And you know, I always enjoyed this film over the years. I appreciate it. I watch it at least once every year. Seeing this film back when it came out in 2008, the action sequences, the musical score, the performances. Even the story in this film is just terrific in my opinion. It's one of the best stories I've seen in a comic book movie during the time it had released back then. And that's why this film, in my opinion, is the best Batman film to date, and no Batman film has came close. And that's why this movie is at number 1. And there you have it. That is all 9 Batman films ranked from worst to best. You know, I wanted to do this list for a very long time, but I actually wanted for the Batman to release first, so this list could be up to date. And so my list is not the perfect list, but it is my opinion. So I want you guys to let me know down below in the comment section. And what is your Batman films ranked from worst to best? It doesn't have to be just a live adaptation Batman movies. It could be any film that has Batman in it. Alright, this is Slim Guy 172 saying peace out.